Well, I think I'm going to go ahead and get started. Got a couple of housekeeping items to go over before we do get started officially with the training for tonight. First of all, this is going to be a recorded meeting. I'll make it available on the city's emergency preparedness website. Should be up either tomorrow or Monday. So for those of you that have people interested in watching it, couldn't be here tonight, I know there's numerous ones out there that indicated that it'll be available. Check the city's emergency preparedness website and you should be able to access this recording. Number two, if you would, we're doing this in a little different format, which means that each of your microphones can go hot. Remember, if you would, to keep it on mute until you have a question. And by way of questions, we have 3 presenters tonight. I'll introduce them in just a minute or let themselves introduce themselves. But what I would like to do is allow them to do their presentation. And then at the end, open it up for questions at the end of each of the presenters. And hopefully that'll give everybody an opportunity. It's kind of an organized cluster to do question and answer periods here on a Zoom meeting. So we have to be kind of a little more structured. So if that works out for everybody, that would be great. So having said that, I want to go over a couple of quick things going forward. Our next quarterly training will occur on November 11th. I think we're going to try that one in person. We should be at a point in time, at least I hope, that we can get back to in-person training. We'll evaluate it as we go along. I know the Delta variant's causing some issues, but put that on your calendars, November 11th, and we'll do a neighborhood watch training on that night. We'll expand our topics list just a little bit. Hopefully it'll be interesting and we'll go from there. Other than that, I think we're good with the question and answer period. Just by way of note, the county council voted today not to impose a mask mandate for our kids in school, in elementary school. But I would make everybody aware that the Delta variant is raising its ugly head. We're having some issues with that. We're averaging almost 800 new cases a day in Salt Lake County, or excuse me, in Utah. So just be aware, go back to your standard assessment of your personal situation as far as personal protective equipment, where you're at with vaccinations, what you need to do to protect you and your family. It's always good for us to review that from time to time. So let's, I'd hate to see anybody infected with that, the Delta variant. I know it's going to happen, but let's see what we can do to protect yourself and your family against that. The first presenter that we have tonight is from Dominion Energy. Adam Thornton is going to talk to us a little bit about what to do post-earthquake or post-major emergency event. He's got about 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes worth of material, and I'm going to have him start out. So having said that, Adam, you want to take a couple of minutes and introduce yourself? And we'll go from there.
Okay, yeah, hopefully everybody can hear me. I'm trying to get the video going as well. And I'll get my PowerPoint presentation started. So like was mentioned, my name is Adam Thorson. I'm with Dominion Energy. I work in the training department for Dominion Energy. Background is in leak surveying and protection. And so I train, main focus on those groups, but we do a fair amount of operations training as well. And we also, I have been asked to take care of all of our fire department trainings, and this also falls under that. So mainly today, what I wanted to do is, I know we were very short on time, but I wanted to give kind of a very condensed version of what the training is that we give to our fire departments. And so that's going to cover the physical properties of natural gas. What we'll find out is that natural gas is actually a very safe product as long as it's contained and maintained within certain boundaries. And then we'll talk about kind of our emergency response and what we do when there is gas leaks, earthquakes, things like that, and times when, you know, the civil volunteers are going to be involved. There's going to be a very large scale response in addition to what we're going to talk about tonight, but it's going to be very much the same. It will just be coordinated through our Emergency Operations Center, which will be located in Salt Lake City at our downtown offices. So that being said, the first thing that we wanted to talk about is the physical properties of natural gas. So kind of cover what makes up the natural gas, what it is, what it does, and really there are three physical properties that every individual gas employee is required to understand, so that when we do get out into these emergency response situations, we understand what's making that situation safe and how we can make it a safer situation than what we're dealing with in the beginning. So natural gas, as many of you are probably aware, is the result of decomposition of organic materials. So hundreds of millions of years ago, there were fish and plants that lived in the oceans, and one of those oceans actually covered the state of Utah, and those animals and plants would die and fall to the bottom of the ocean floor and get covered with silt and with sand and with dirt. And over time, it just continued to build up and continued to put pressure and heat onto those things. And as they decomposed in those conditions, it created methane gas and natural gas. There's other things that are usually nearby the natural gas wells as we find, but what we pull out of the ground, what we use, is simply the natural gas product. So it's made up of 90 to 95% methane. The remainder of the makeup of the gas is different anes. It depends on usually the location, the atmospheric pressure, the elevation, things like that are going to determine the remainder of that makeup. There's going to be some inert things in there, some carbon dioxide, hydrogen, water vapor, and things that are not going to burn. And those kinds of things are what's going to determine the BTU value, which will tell us how combustible that material is going to be. So it's similar to the octane level of your gasoline in telling us how hot that gas is going to be able to burn and how much we're actually going to be able to utilize of that flame. So natural gas typically is about 92 to 98% combustible, again, depending on the other things that make up that remaining 5 to 10%. So the three, like I said, properties that every one of us is expected to understand and know as we come into the natural gas world is, number one, natural gas is an odorless gas. We actually add the odorant to it. It is a 50-50 mixture of butyl mercaptan and thiophene. And as with many regulations that are in place, this one came in place because of an incident that happened in the 1930s where a school had tapped into a natural gas line to bring gas into the school in Texas. And at the time, there was no odorant laws in place. And so they had unodorized gas coming into the school, and it filled up pockets of the basement of the school. And in the afternoon, the shop teacher turned on a saw and the school exploded. And there were hundreds of casualties and many more injuries. But there were hundreds of people killed, students and teachers. And because of that, they brought about the law that we were required to odorize our natural gas. Natural gas is non-toxic. So in normal situations, if you're outside and there's a gas leak, if there's an earthquake and a gas meter falls off a building, there's a gas leak, it's really not going to do anything as far as causing physical symptoms. They have done testing on both humans and animals with different concentrations for different periods of time with no ill effects. The things that we do find that are catastrophic with our natural gas is inside buildings. So if there are people inside the building, we want to get them out because it can cause asphyxiation. Natural gas does displace the oxygen in the air. And so we want to evacuate those people and get them to a safe location as quickly as possible, and obviously shut off the source of that gas. And the second thing that makes it dangerous or harmful or fatal is uncontrolled ignitions. Obviously, what we're trying to get out of that is an ignition. We're trying to get the flame and the heat out of it. But if we don't have full control over that, then it can cause a catastrophic event. And the third thing that we talk about is natural gas is lighter than air. So again, in most situations, if there is a natural disaster and we are out there working on a gas leak, most of that gas outside is just going to rise and vent into the atmosphere. and really just mix with the air and not cause a whole lot of issues. So again, it's lighter than air, it's odorless and non-toxic, which means that for the most part, you won't even really know that it's there once it rises and blends into the air. So in order for the gas to combust, we do have to have the three parts of the fire triangle, as many of you may or may not be aware of. But in order to have anything ignite, we have to have three components. We have to have oxygen, heat, and fuel. And those three things combined will create the chain reaction that is fire. And so in order for natural gas to combust, we have to have the gas, the fuel in a gaseous state, which, you know, if we think about the states of matter, products have to be heated, matter has to be heated in order for it to reach a vapor state. Natural gas is at minus 260 degrees Fahrenheit in order for it to be in a gaseous state. So the majority of the time it's going to be there, which is another thing that makes it extremely safe is it's pretty much always going to be in a gaseous state, and it's always going to rise unless we're using it and controlling it where we have it. Next thing we need is we have to have heat. There are many heat sources that can ignite the natural gas, but another thing that makes it very safe is the high ignition temperature comparatively to other gases. Natural gas has to be heated to about 11 to 1200 degrees Fahrenheit, typically on the higher end of that scale. Some of the things that we want to be aware of is combustion vehicles. So cars, we don't want to be driving around too much, opening and closing garage doors, making, receiving phone calls in gaseous environments. Things like that could generate a static spark, light switches, and things that could generate that static spark that could generate enough heat in order for that fuel to ignite. And the last thing that we have to have is oxygen. So the perfect ideal mixture is 10% gas. It's a 10-to-1 ratio. At that 10% gas ratio, that 90% air to 10% gas, we'll see a flame kind of like that number 4 flame there with the really nice, steady blue, almost invisible flame. And then I'm not sure if any of you have ever heard of the UEL and LEL limits, the upper explosive limit and the lower explosive limit. But what that means is those are actually the extents to which the gas will ignite at all. So upper explosive limit is 15% gas. Anything more than 15% gas in the atmosphere and it's too rich, it won't be able to ignite. And then anything below 5% gas in the atmosphere and there's not enough fuel for it to ignite. So that's another thing that makes it extremely safe is the fact that it has such a limited range of combustion. Outside of those ranges, it won't ignite. When we talk about, you know, buildings that are full of gas, again, some of the things that we're talking about are asphyxiation could become an issue. And obviously, as we start to vent that gas through the house, we could end up in that 5 to 15% ignition range. And then if we do have a spark or something that could generate an ignition, we will have an uncontrolled ignition. And so that's another reason why we want to keep people safe and get them out to safety. So when we do have that nice 10-to-1 ratio, that perfect 10% gas, we're going to see a nice steady blue flame, like we said. When we get outside of that range, we're going to see it start to dance a little bit and flicker. And what that's doing is it's actually looking for oxygen in the air. It's actually looking to better be able to burn and be able to find that. Temperature differences are quite a bit different. With the nice 10-to-1 ratio and the steady combustion flame, we're going to have 2600 degrees Fahrenheit. With the improper combustion and that yellow flame, it's going to be closer to about 1800 degrees. And then what we're going to generate with both of those flames, we're going to have carbon dioxide, nitrogen, water vapor, and heat. Obviously, heat being the one that we really are concerned with and the one that we're really aiming for and getting out of that. The other things, carbon dioxide and nitrogen, water vapor, those things are all present in the atmosphere already. One of the biggest things that we are concerned with is venting those products to the outside. We say that a 100,000 BTU furnace, which is fairly average, will generate about a gallon of water per hour in steam vapor. And so being able to vent that to the outside avoids having your homes and our customers' homes being flooded with that. The problem that we have is we can't always be 100% certain of that 10-to-1 ratio. And when we get outside of that ratio, we start to see that improper combustion and the impingement on the combustion chamber, and we start to generate carbon monoxide, which everybody is very aware of. Carbon monoxide, we call it the silent killer. And with carbon monoxide, we have very specific rules and regulations as far as what we do. Like I said, it's known as the silent killer. It's odorless, colorless, tasteless, dissolves instantly in liquid, and is among the more deadly toxins known to man. So when we encounter carbon monoxide, which is one of the other issues that we see, and one of the things when we talk about appliances not functioning properly, if there were a major disaster and things got out of position, we would start to see some of these levels. Anything below 10 parts per million is considered normal ambient levels, and we don't need to take action with that. At 11 to 69 parts per million, that's about the point where you're going to start to see physical symptoms. It's going to manifest as flu-like symptoms, and we will start to consider ventilation of the structure at that point. 70 to 199 parts per million, you'll start to see more serious symptoms, vomiting, dizziness, breathlessness, possibly loss of consciousness. And at that point, we would consider evacuating the structure. And then anything over 200 parts per million carbon monoxide, we are required to evacuate that structure and get people out into the fresh air. So now for the main reason why we're all here, to talk about our emergency response and kind of what we would do if there was any type of emergency, really. We have our emergency response plan sectioned off into our primary objectives, and there's, I believe, 8 of our primary objectives, but really we prioritize the top 3 or 4. And the main priority, our number one priority, is safety. So any type of incident that we respond to, any type of emergency that we respond to, whether it's a natural disaster or whether it's a simple gas leak on a house gas meter, and our number one priority is going to be safety of the public, safety of our personnel, safety of the first responders, and anybody else that's responding to that incident. We want to make sure that everybody's safe and that everybody's able to move on and move forward and come up with a solution to that problem. Beyond that, we want to obviously protect our equipment and infrastructure. It can get very costly, and obviously it's going to damage the ability that we have to meet our mission or our vision, which is to deliver a safe and dependable product to our customers. We want to limit the overall damage, loss, and risk. Again, the cost associated with that, the damages, and the people that are going to be out of heat. And we want to restore normal operating conditions, obviously getting people back into their homes as quickly as possible. If we think back to the earthquake that happened about 1.5 years ago in Salt Lake, many of you probably responded in that situation and probably met some of our company personnel out there. And basically this should have been or was the procedure that they were following, is to keep people safe, make sure that whatever actions they took were in the best interest of their safety and the public and customer safety, and then trying to get people relit and get their appliances back up and running, get their heat back on and water back on as quickly as possible. So when we do have gas leaks, which is going to be our number one concern, when we respond, say, in an earthquake situation or a natural disaster situation, our main concern is the gas leaking, obviously. And so we've actually changed some of our emergency response over the last year, and we've established what we determine or defined as a gas-filled structure, which is any structure with inside natural gas concentrations at or above 1% gas by volume, or any outside flowing or leaking gas, which could result in the accumulation of gas inside a structure that could end up being that 1% gas by volume inside the house. So when we do identify that, when we find that gas inside, anything outside, unless it's causing that danger of getting inside the house, we're not going to evacuate all of those houses. We're really only going to start evacuating if there's a need for it, if we determine that there's a possibility of gas accumulating inside that structure. So when we do evacuate, we're going to have what we term the hot zone, which is basically from that initial structure, the gas-filled structure that we found, 330 feet diameter. We also have, you can see some little divots in that ring inside that red circle. So we also have the definition of with 2 like-size structures to offer protection. Basically, we want to avoid the possibility of that house exploding and somebody being in the way of flying debris. And so inside that hot zone, we'll consider very carefully the possibility of evacuating other customers within that hot zone, shutting off gas to the immediate gas field structure. We're not going to shut off gas to any of the others. I know one of the biggest things in an emergency that customers want to know is how to shut their gas off. And the reality is, unless there's a serious issue, we're not always going to advise that we shut the gas off, because first of all, it takes a lot of time for us to get out and relight those houses to turn that gas back on. Our procedure is that we typically send our personnel out to turn that gas back on. So if we have thousands of customers, or we have over 1 million customers now in our service system, and so if we have all of those customers shutting gas off to their houses, and we have to go back out and turn that gas back on and relight it, it becomes very time consuming. The other issue that we have with it is a safety issue. A lot of appliances nowadays have automatic ignition, and so with that, it's usually a heated coil, a heated ceramic coil, that's going to generate that ignition source, that ignition heat, that's going to cause that burner to ignite. And if we shut the gas off to that, eventually the thermostat's going to call for heat, and it's going to try and ignite. And we have seen issues with these automatic igniters and people shutting off gas, and it causes an even bigger issue. So most of the time, we're going to use judgment calls. And typically we're going to tell customers that it's, unless they're absolutely certain that they have to shut that gas off, we're probably going to recommend that they don't shut the gas off. And then as far as the evacuation goes, beyond the hot zone, we're going to have the warm zone, which is where we're going to stage all of our personnel. So we've actually started following the same incident command system that's followed by the military and fire departments and police departments. And so that's where we're going to set up our incident command center and begin the process of solving that problem, or creating the objectives to fix the issue that's going on. And then beyond that is going to be the cold zone. That's where we're going to send all of the evacuees that we've removed from their homes. That's where we're going to stage news media if they're present, and anybody that's not immediately needed for the response of that incident. When we do get called out to a gas leak, there's a couple of things that we want to avoid. Again, any type of ignition source that could create a static spark, any type of open flame, combustion engines, anything like that. We're going to avoid ringing doorbells because they can generate static sparks. We're going to avoid telephone calls, cell phones, things that are not intrinsically safe that could generate that spark to create the ignition. And then we're going to carry our leak detection equipment. I'm not sure, and maybe somebody can answer this when we get through to the question answer, but I'm not sure what type of sensors you are going to be carrying, if any. I know the fire departments, most of the fire departments are carrying a 4-gas indicator or something similar to that. A few of them might have intrinsically safe leak detection equipment, CGIs, combustible gas indicators. But for the most part, we're going to bring the equipment in that we can actually enter those homes and check for the gaseous atmosphere, and we're going to make sure that equipment is already turned on and functioning properly. And we're going to remove any non-intrinsically safe electronic devices. So things like cell phones, we actually have intrinsically safe radios that we're going to carry in. Our cell phones, as far as our procedure goes, are supposed to be left in the trucks in the warm zone. And then light switches are another thing that could cause an ignition source. Anytime we have appliances on, we want to leave those on. And if appliances are off, we want to leave them off. Outside calls, inside calls are going to be generated to our call center. This happens a lot with our natural disasters. Our call center and our dispatch center were very inundated with calls as far as the earthquake went last year. Basically, what they're going to be doing, their process as far as the calls that they're going to be fielding, is they're going to ask if there's any odors inside, if the customers can identify the location of the leak, and if there's any construction work taking place nearby, or obviously if there was a natural disaster, that's going to be noted as well. If any of those things are answered as a yes, then we're going to instruct them to evacuate and tell them that they need to get to a safe location. And we want somebody there that can make contact with our personnel when we respond as well. With our investigation, once we arrive on scene, we're going to start investigating for the gas and try and pinpoint the location of that leak and figure out what our concentration is. If we do identify the gas field structure requirements are met, we'll begin our evacuation procedure. Again, removing the immediate people that are in danger. We're going to look inside that hot zone. We're actually going to coordinate and rely heavily on the fire departments now and the other emergency responders as far as the evacuation within the hot zone and determining who needs to be evacuated and who's going to be better left inside their homes. And then, like I said, we only really want to shut off the gas service to the gas field structure, and only if it's safe to do so. Again, our first priority is safety. If there's an unsafe situation, we can't get in there, we're going to prefer to leave that on rather than get in there and try and shut it off. Outdoor leaks, again, these are things that are going to be very prevalent when we have natural disasters, big things that are required for additional resources to respond to. So with the outdoor leaks, if it appears that we do have gas migrating inside the structure, toward the structure, we want to verify that. We want to check inside the building. If it's not present inside, we are not required to evacuate, but our first responders, our company responders may still make that decision to evacuate that structure. If it is determined that that structure is a gas-filled structure, then we will follow that procedure and begin the evacuation process. I believe, I hope I kept that within the 15 to 20 minutes. Like I said, a lot of our,
Adam, you did a great job as far as the time. I know you wanted to open up to questions now. If we can do this in kind of an orderly fashion, if you want to go ahead and unmute your microphone and then start with a question, I'll try and monitor it. If we get too many people chiming in at once, it'll just be confusing. So Adam, I kind of cut you off. What else did you want to say?
Oh, I was just going to say, I know a big thing with the emergency response that you all are going to be dealing with is the natural disasters, the earthquakes and fires and tornadoes and whatnot. We have had a few of those in Utah, interestingly enough. And like I said, our main priority is just going to be the safety of the people. And as long as we can coordinate our emergency response with people's safety, making sure that you guys are safe, making sure that our people are safe and the public is safe, that's really going to be our number one concern. So other than that, if anybody has any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer those, or at least try and find an answer and get back to you.
Adam, let me start it off. The one thing you touched on earlier was the fact that you don't typically recommend that a customer without an obvious sign of a gas leak shut their gas off. Can you kind of expand on what they should look for, what they should, I know that there's smell, but give us kind of a hint on what we should look for if after an earthquake or some other natural disaster, how we assess that meter and maybe something on the inside of the house.
Right. So the biggest thing with the public and for anybody without a combustible gas indicator or some type of leak detection equipment, the biggest thing is going to be the smell. Most of you have probably smelled it at one point or another, whether it was, on a gas leak in your own home, if you left a pilot light, or if you left a burner on without the pilot light running, you've definitely smelled the gas and know what that very pleasant aroma is. And so that's going to be the main way that most people are going to be able to identify it. Other ways, if you're close enough, you may be able to hear it hissing. Typically beyond the meter set, we actually have it regulated down to 4 ounces of pressure inside people's homes. And so it's not going to be a large sound. It's not going to be a very large volume leak inside homes, but you may be able to hear some hissing sound associated with it. But the biggest, the most common method is going to be by the smell.
Great. What other questions do we have for Adam? Sounds like you answered them all, Adam. Thank you so much, sir.
Okay, perfect. Well, I will shut myself down and turn it over back to you then.
Thank you, sir. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
All right. We've got Travis Jones next up from Rocky Mountain Power. Travis, you take it away, sir.
All right. You guys hearing me all right? See my screen there?
I got you.
Great. I'm turning my camera off. I apologize. I'm getting some glitching, so hopefully it'll help with the audio here. But Like I said, my name's Travis Jones. I'm a regional business manager with Rocky Mountain Power. I work with various customer communities in Utah and fortunate to be able to work with Cottonwood Heights. I also work with Holiday and Midvale Murray and Mill Creek. So kind of have the east side there as well as Wasatch County. I appreciate this opportunity to just review some of our emergency management safety protocols and kind of take a different approach where, I want to cover some of the earthquake items that we dealt with as far as our reaction, and then really get into some wildfire. Wildfire being a hot item right now, no pun intended. I think it's something be good to talk about with this group tonight. Rocky Mountain Power and now let's see here. So Rocky Mountain Power, Pacific Power, under the umbrella of Pacificorp, which is a Mid-American Berkshire Hathaway company. We provide power to over 2 million customers in our 6-state service territory. Over 80,000 miles of distribution and high voltage transmission lines, and most of which is overhead. Being one of the largest energy providers in the West, we're fortunate to be positioned where we have redundancy of our 2 major hubs, the one we have here in Salt Lake City, as well as one we have in Portland, Oregon. And not just our operations and control centers, but with our outage and customer call centers as well. We're also members of the Western Electric Coordinating Councils, called WEC, which provides mutual assistance to various regions throughout the United States as well as Canada. If there's major events impacting large regions, fires, for example, flooding, we can reroute power from other groups and restore power quicker, get critical services back online, and provide staffing and equipment and other supplies. Historically, we've been able to help out with, say, hurricanes and Texas area, Louisiana, and also with fires, California and Oregon. Recently with the earthquake we had March 18th, 2020, that 7.2 magnitude earthquake, this all kind of went into effect. We did get assistance from other territories. It shook the Salt Lake Valley pretty bad. Those of you that were here, it's kind of unusual and unique for us that have lived in this valley for a while. But prior to this, Pacificorp invested a significant amount of energy and resources into upgrading and hardening our system, as well as training our employees and conducting like mock scenarios and drills. We actually had a drill at our North Temple campus on Redwood Road, North Temple, about a week before to test out some of our earthquake protocols. So we're real fortunate there with the timing. We do follow industry standards and best management practices, and our equipment's designed to meet or exceed code. Because of that, we're able to bring most of the 750,000 customers and 250 megawatts of power that went down back online immediately. One of the neat things that happened was we instantaneously transferred all our operations and control centers to Portland so they could start dispatching our local crews, assessing the damage, taking calls from customers, bringing in additional resources that were needed as well. Earthquake was a unique event. Something that we dealt with that was unusual was a lot of the fluids and oils in the equipment was shaken up, which is something unique to the utility industry. They deal with that in California, but that was unique for Utah. So the post-earthquake, there was a lot of inspections, we went through and looked at every inch of line, every piece of equipment, all our hardware to make sure everything was in good shape and operating correctly. Kind of shift gears to more to fire. This is becoming more of a common hazard. It's obviously been something in the West, but it's starting to be more of a problem in Utah, especially with wildfires. The potential for a fire is always very close and near, and something we're taking serious. We're been more of an active, dynamic approach. It's more ongoing than what we've done in the past. And our number one job is to keep our customers and the residents safe by providing safe and reliable power. That's something we pride ourselves on doing. Prior to the fire season, we did ramp up our efforts and start conducting pre-season work that we can focus on things we can reduce during the winter months, where some of the high elevation that tends to be more fire dynamic areas that can be problematic. Pacificorp does have a robust and evolving wildfire mitigation plan that includes a combination of strategies for situational awareness and reducing and mitigating initiative sources. Our ability to respond and quickly and effectively has been key to keep fires to a minimal, and we're always enhancing our tools and ways we can continue to reduce the chance of ignition sources. talk about the pre-season activity a little bit. The visual inspection, these 5 keys have been driving our program here. The boots on the ground, the visual inspections. These are guys that are out there actually in the field, checking the conditions, verifying what our equipment's saying. The next is the vegetation inspections, protocols. We've done patrols, whether that's manually through drones, unmanned aircraft. We use a lot of LiDAR technology. I was actually the forester and arborist for the company for about 15 plus years, and something that's dear to me that we are constantly conducting work. You've had the guys in your yard doing routine maintenance, clearing for the overhead lines, and we've really upped our game to make sure that our poles are cleared as well for certain hardware that could potentially be problematic if a spark happened. Weather station monitoring is a new thing. We have close to 200 private weather stations mounted to poles. You can see that picture on the right of that pole. It's just like a little arm. It almost looks like the older street light arms that hang out. Also, situational awareness. This is something that all our employees are being trained in being aware of their surroundings more in their environment. We have brought on in-house meteorologist department, which is new to our program. And it's really impressive, some of the modeling they're doing now for risks, the forecasting they're doing, and the technology. It's great to see, and I'll get into that in a second here too. Last key there is the operational practices. We do ongoing training and drills, and something we've adopted that when we're close to a situation, or if we're starting to become time where fire may be imminent, we'll stop testing any equipment and operating equipment that could potentially cause a spark or cause a problem. We do work. Another part that's kind of a tiered from this is the communication part, which, working with elected officials, local EMS, trying to coordinate, already having that in place so that we'll have lists aware, and we've identified places where there may be critical care or that EMS is needing to set up to help us assist in our efforts of mitigating or preventing fires. A lot of the key equipment upgrades we've been working on is more of a long-term strategy. We do have a 10-year inspection plan where we are upgrading and inspecting our equipment, but with fires becoming more rampant, we've started to focus on this a little more, where we've added fusing and what's called Hendrix spacers, which keep wires apart with trees fall and slap the lines. We use covered conductor wire, and in some places where it makes sense, even underground. But this has been more of a long-term strategy that we've had in place, but we've definitely ramped up recently in these last few years. I talked a little bit about our meteorologist department. This is a neat thing where we have brought in-house meteorologists that focusing on the situational awareness. They're really throttling up our efforts here. And the indices that we've looked at and collected, it used to be those 4 or 5 things. And now with supercomputers and technology and modeling, cameras, our weather stations, we're really getting to the point where now they're able to predict when the fires are coming, the areas well out. And I'll get into we have a 5-day watch that we do here at Rocky Mountain Power. And it's been fairly accurate. I mean, you can see it in this picture with just this Mount Shasta in our Oregon territory, from, wind speeds to heat zones. It's really great, the live cameras, but all those indicators are helping us make the decisions that we can proactively get ahead of situations and reduce any ignition sources. All our employees are receiving these daily emails with a 5-day forecast for weather-related events. It's really hot, during fire season, this is a big focus, but it does also consider flooding, rainstorms, wind events for the various service territories we have, from the coast to the high elevation desert. And this is every day, so it is 5-day, but it's constantly being updated. This is another thing that each employee is receiving every day is an infographic to help kind of planning and focus areas, as well as preparatory items if events are predicted. This has been something that we just rolled out this year just to create more situational awareness. And we figure with the volume of employees we have out there, at any given time, that on our system with over 5,000 employees, those are sets of eyes that could provide valuable information, even with some of the most basic training. So public safety power shutoff. This is another tool in our belt. It's kind of new since 2020 for our service territories. We did reach out to the community when we started approaching to do this, where we have high probable conditions for fire. And really what it is, it's a proactive way of de-energizing the lines. You know, I've mentioned the many factors before that would determine areas that could be problematic. It could be an imminent threat where we knew we may have a, you know, say it's in a canyon by Parley's or coming out of Big Cottonwood, Little Cottonwood. This gives us the opportunity to proactively de-energize the lines, which has caused some controversy. I mean, it's been something that's been a sensitive subject, but seeing the potential for catastrophic effects in other states, like I said, it just is another tool to help us avoid an unnecessary ignition source. These things we look at typically have been red flag days, wind speeds, but adding all these indices from our meteorologist group, it really piles on to where we can accurately predict some of the challenges we're going to be faced with. As these things progress, we're looking, you know, we work up this tier through the arrows as we go along. Every one of these factors has to be checked off before we will conduct a public safety power shutoff. So it may be high wind, it could be a red flag day. It really has to have all of these aligned for, you know, lack of a better, you know, the perfect storm needs to line up. When this happens, we open up an emergency operations center locally here, and we have 24/7 dispatch going there to man these situations. There's a lot of communication that goes on at this point. We want to reach out, and what we found is public information and keeping people informed has really helped with this. Our notification process, we want to make sure that we're sufficiently letting residents and our customers know who's going to be impacted, you know, what customers, what communities. We can do this by a call, text, or email. You can see the 5 different steps here where 72 to 48 hours is out there. We may start to notice, folks, that all the situations are lining up. We're predicting something within the next 3 to 4 days. And then as it works through these different tiers, if the conditions are changing or something lightens up, maybe the wind speeds slow down, we'll pull the plug on this, and then it kind of does a reset to where we'll start over and do the 72 to 48 hour notice. You will get a call, text, or email if this does cancel, just to keep you in the loop of what's going on. Mentioned community outreach. Our public outreach and education focus has really been a crucial component of the success of a public safety power shutoff. And, you know, we've tried to take many approaches. We've been diverse. Obviously, with Cottonwood Heights, we have a, you know, unique demographic. I think even with the East Bench there, where, you know, a lot of folks are expecting to get this on social media, instant information, but there are a lot of others that maybe are expecting a call on their landline, and we want to try to address all those and make sure we're meeting the needs of our customers so they're getting the information they need, keep themselves safe. There's a lot of resources out there to assist the public. Rocky Mountain Power is a community partner, and we want to help. You know, we've talked about setting up cooling stations, base camps when the power's out, working with the community to make sure that there's batteries, food, first aid, water, supporting the local EMS, oxygen. You know, this is something our EMS team here that we have in-house has proactively reached out to all the city, county representatives to have a plan in place so that we're not under the gun when a situation may arise. We've identified centralized locations where if there was a shutoff, we'd still have power fed from another alternate source so that we can continue to provide these services. We have a 5-day forecast also specific to the public safety power shutoff, or what's called the FHCA, which is a fire high consequence area. This gets updated in real time as conditions change, so customers and residents can anticipate if there's a chance for an upcoming event. And this is on our website, so it's something you can look at. Kind of hard to see on the right side, but it has our different districts. We've got, for folks in Cottonwood Heights area, the Little Cottonwood, Olympus Cove, kind of over to Mill Creek, and Big Cottonwood as well. So the public safety power shutoff, this is a map that shows the area. The colors you're seeing, the greens, the lighter and the dark, these are the shutoff areas. The underlaying color that's orange is a fire high consequence area. Now these you know, obviously a fire doesn't know where a street boundary is and isn't going to mind the traffic rules, but these boundaries are constantly changing and shaping. And as we approach this with all of those indicators I talked about from the weather perspective, the meteorologist perspective, we're also looking from an operations and equipment advantage where if there's places we can put in fusing, if there's spots we can reroute as we upgrade our system, these boundaries are constantly changing their dynamic. our goal is to ultimately reduce the area that is within this fire high consequence area and the public power safety shutoff. The nice thing for Cottonwood Heights being uniquely positioned, even by the canyons, we were really able to cut it down to only 18 customers that are in that area that could potentially be shut off. That's pretty impressive where you look at even neighboring communities where there are upwards of a couple of hundred residents, restaurants, commercial businesses, everything. So that was something that for Cottonwood Heights, you guys are positioned well where hopefully we don't ever have to do that, but it should have a minimal impact.
Travis, can I chime in for just a second? We had the opportunity a couple of years ago to meet with representatives from your company, and they went to great lengths to explain to us how this works, when it would work, and the likelihood that it won't have to be imposed here in Cottonwood Heights. But if it does, it's not the entirety of the area. It's just a very minimal spot, and they have control over the demographics, very strict control over the demographics. So there are other areas of the valley, other areas of the state that have very large and wide and vast areas that could be shut down. So we're very lucky up here. So, but the point I'm trying to make is we work closely with Rocky Mountain Power on this. They explained to us how it would work, why it's important, and the minimal impact. At least we hope it's minimal impact to our residents. So.
No, definitely, Paul, and that's a great point. And it's part of why we love the communities we live in. I'm a Holiday resident. I love this area. And it's great, but we also comes with living in the wildland urban interface of where the forest meets the urban setting. And as we constantly develop and houses sprawl, we create some of these situations. But yeah, I appreciate that because it is something we want to work with the communities, and you guys are positioned well. Even Mill Creek, they're upwards of about 300 residents that could be impacted potentially. And this is just another map kind of showing more of the big Cottonwood area as it moves south. Just zoomed in, not the best detail here. I apologize, these maps aren't too great. Also Little Cottonwood, it is interesting as you get to the canyon road there going up towards the Marquee. There's an area that comes down by Lakai that's within that zone, and then it wraps back around. But like I said, this is something that changes as wind patterns change and vegetation conditions change. It's a constantly dynamic mapping process. And we're proud of the steps we've taken to be able to narrow that down and reduce those could potentially be impacted. So things we can do, a lot of these tips might be, preaching to the choir stuff you guys are aware of, but I'd like to get the information out to the public. The number one thing I've focused on in the communities I work with is this step number one, updating your contact information with Rocky Mountain Power. I think most of us are comfortable with getting our bill. We pay our bill. Maybe it's even automated or online. But I really encourage you, as a citizen, as a resident, to get that information updated. If you are aware of critical care residents, your neighbors, maybe, someone on oxygen, I'd have them get on and update that information. And like I said, whether it's a text, an email, in-person call, we want to have as much information as we can available so that we're ensuring that we can reach out and work with Cottonwood Heights to notify folks that may otherwise not be able to, respond on their own or may need assistance. And some of this stuff we've vetted out over the last year too and focused on, ways we can identify critical care customers. So we're pretty proficient with that. But like I said, if you ever, maybe it's family or a neighbor, I just encourage you to reach out, have them do that. Other thing is defensible space. Love to have those trees. It's why we love where we live. But give yourself some space. 10 plus feet is great around the house. It's good to see those trees out the window. Update your personal emergency supply plans and supplies. I think in Utah as a culture, we do a great job with that with our 72-hour kits and our food supply sources. And then medical needs, that's obviously a no-brainer as well. Make sure you have sufficient supply. And if you're on oxygen or other needs, make sure you've got backup sources or a plan in place. You can look at our website to do any of that. And really, our customer call center number is the best way too. They can work through customer solutions. That was really just a quick blast through. Wanted to touch on some of the fire concerns we have and some of the steps we're taking to try to keep the community safe while providing safe, reliable power and avoid situations we're seeing all up and down the West.
Travis, thank you. Very informative. What questions do we have for Travis?
I have a question.
Yeah, I have a question. Oh, go ahead.
So back in 2012, there was I think it was a CME or some sort of a solar flare that erupted from the sun. And I read on the news that if it had impacted the Earth, it would have caused all sorts of destruction along the power lines and the power grid in around the world. And I've read that in general, the United States is anyway, power grid is not necessarily hardened towards these types of astronomical events. And I was wondering if that is something that you could comment about.
Yeah, it's a great point. PacifiCorp, we're really focused on renewables and alternate ways of providing energy. As we move towards battery storage and really reducing our coal usage and non-renewable sources, it is a concern. And I think it's something that, I not being an engineer myself and speaking to the standards, we're always looking for ways we can beef up the system, but it is a valid concern. I think that something at that level would be so widespread that as a nation, it is something that would hugely impact us. I had that slide earlier about the cooperative agreements between all the other utilities and regions throughout the U.S. If something were to happen where it impacted the West, that would work. But I think with a solar flare, that in theory would take the entire grid down. The U.S. would cascade, causing catastrophic problems. So I really don't have a solid answer. I can look into that and see if we have some information. I can tell you from a personal perspective, I drive a 1977 GMC that turns over most of the time, needs a little gas, and if all the electronics fried, it still might fire up. But that's just me there. I don't know. Sorry, I don't have a great answer for that, but I can follow up on that.
Hey, Travis, this is Lynn Marsing. This question might be a little bit premature based on what's up next, but I think it'd be very helpful for people that wanted backup generation. I guess that's the next topic here. If Rocky Mountain Power could provide a load chart in order to be able to size the backup generation, do you have access to that, or where can we find Rocky Mountain Power's load chart that would tell us the loads for refrigerators, freezers, furnaces, so on and so forth?
Well, that's a great question. We do have some generic information as far as on our RockyMountainPower.net website that'll break down, what those types of, appliances would use and how much that would, as well as standards for generation. Our focus has been with making sure if folks are getting generators that they're installed properly and there's a make before break for safety issues, that they're not feeding back onto the grid system. There is an infographic that has some of that detail. And what I'll do is I'm making a note here. I can get this to Paul that he can get out to this group, or at least the link. But that would give you an idea. And it'll also have some of the, the information as far as if you do go that route of a generator, some safety things you can do for yourself. I know from working on storms and outages, it's a big concern. And the power's off and we start hearing generators and hope it's not back feeding on the system. But I think, more of what your question is just to make sure you have sufficient load there to keep the fridge on, basic lighting and the, essentials going. I'll follow up with a link on that.
Yeah, just a chart that would show the nominal and the inrush so that people could, size their generation based on what they wanted to use as critical load. It'd be very helpful, I think.
Great comment. I appreciate it.
Travis, if you get that to me, I'll be happy to distribute it.
Thanks, Paul.
I have a question. This is Dick Abbott. When they had the large power outage on the East Coast, it went clear up into Canada, they said the large transformers and substations triggered most of that. Can you tell me how long it would be to replace one of those power sources? They're not generators. I'm trying to think of the title.
Transformers,
yeah.
Yeah.
That's what I'm looking for. The transformers. If we had one go out in the Cottonwood Heights area, how long would it take to replace that?
Yeah, it's good question, Dick. So our system, you look at transmission system. You've heard of probably these Gateway West projects. We're constantly looking at ways we can bring in additional sources of transmission. When we talk transmission, we're typically saying 46,000 volts and above. In Utah, we have typically 46 to 138,000. We do have some 345,000, the main corridors you'll see running past the airport, some areas up to 500,000. And we try to make sure these systems are looped and the system's designed so that if there is failure, if there's problems, you can bring in from another source and back. Some of these old systems are radial fed, which they kind of terminate and there's no alternate. Now, in a situation like that, if it was widespread enough where we didn't have the means to backfeed from a different source and it was an equipment failure, those transformers, they can be upwards of 30 megavolts, which 30 MVA. You think of the transformer on the pole or at your house, it might be like 25 or 25 kilovolts. So you're talking exponentially significant. We do keep some of that equipment on spare. Within our substations, even, we have spare operating bays that anticipate that. And with the earthquake, just for example, by the airport, we had one of our terminal large transformers go down, but they were able to use the alternate spare bay and just seamlessly get that thing fired back up. It has been a challenge with the way the economy is, and still, it's really unheard of in my career how long it's taken to order materials from stuff that was maybe 22 to 40 weeks. Now you're talking 3 years in some places. So we try to keep spare equipment. We do have also a couple of situations. We have a mobile transformer that it's basically like a semi truck trailer that they can wheel in that could sufficiently provide power to, say, the community of Cottonwood Heights or a smaller portion. But yeah, we look to keep spare equipment on hand as best as we can. That large scale, our system is designed that it should be able to reroute. And I know from just where we're positioned in Salt Lake Valley, we're fortunate because stuff's coming down from Idaho and Wyoming. We're pulling from Nevada. We're coming up from California and Colorado. And so, being in the Wasatch Front, we're actually in a great spot that hopefully, in theory, we should never be in a situation like that.
Okay,
All right,
thanks.
what else do we have for Travis?
Just a little superficial one. Earlier this summer, did we have a public safety shutoff on the east part of the city? It comes from a comment made by a serviceman on some equipment on 35th East about 7600 South when power was out for a few hours or half a day. And then also, just even today, we had a couple of power bumps, 315, 320. Any ideas or equipment upgrades going on?
Yeah, as far as the shutoff, I am not aware of any this year. I haven't been noticed of any. I guess that would kind of be almost in the Sandy there. I don't think we've had any that I would have been in the loop. I don't work with Sandy directly, but we haven't had it. We almost had to schedule one, but they pulled the plug. The conditions changed. So I would say as far as that was not. Now today we've had a couple outages on. I'm seeing looks like our hammer. We had a car pole situation that looked like caused some issues that they got repaired, but those would have been some intermittent issues. So, that's those can be tough repairs for us because sometimes they'll slap the lines together. It's a fuse situation, but when they snap poles and multiple poles, you're typically going to see an outage of some duration while we get a crane out there to reset them. But yeah, I'm seeing a couple today. We had an accident. It looks like somebody hit a pole, and I wonder if that is what you're experiencing.
They were ripples of less than a second, just enough to upset all the electronics.
Yeah, and that could be it, because if it was just, we do have reclosure equipment on our system that, automatically reset, uses, it'll try and trip 2 or 3 times, but that'll be within typically milliseconds, the cycles on there. But for sensitive equipment, that could have been it. And that's been my experience where not enough to take it out, but more of like almost a voltage type of issue you'd see. I don't know if that answered your question.
Thank you.
Tom, to go along with that question you asked on that public safety shutdown, we were assured by Rocky Mountain Power they would give us notification when that was going to go through. And it's the areas that we're mainly looking at are on the south end of Danish over towards the water treatment plant over in those areas. So there's not a lot of customers citywide that would be affected. It's a very localized event. And I'm pretty confident they would have called us. So I don't think that's what it was. Just
And I can tell you,
uneducated 2 cents.
I work with Metro Water that's up there too with the water districts, and they're not shy to call when we're having issues. And I hear from them. Especially right now with the low water, they're pumping full bore.
Yeah. Anything else for Travis before we move on to Jonathan? We're kind of running tight on time here. All right, Travis, thank you so much. Much appreciate the information, very informative. And we do have a great working relationship with Rocky Mountain Power. So thank you, sir.
Thanks, Paul. I'll follow up with those links too. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. All right. Next on the list is Jonathan Jones. Jonathan is here to talk to us about emergency residential generators. So Jonathan, take it away.
Okay. Thank you so much. How do I make me go full screen? We'll have a couple of things we want to look at. Is that something I need to do on my end? Can everybody hear me, first of all? Okay, good. Good. Let me see. There we go. Okay, well, first of all, I want to thank Paul for inviting me to share some information, and I hope this will be very useful. This is what we're talking about tonight. I asked the question, why backup power? I think we understand why backup power can be important. We look at things like the high wind storm of last September 2020. Probably some of you are involved with that. The polar vortex that hit Texas in the south, rolling blackouts in California, other weather events. We might have something here, unusual heat. That's really what happened in Texas there, is they had unusual cold, and it created all kinds of problems. If we had excessive heat here for a week or two, 115 degrees or whatever might be totally out of our norm, that could cause us some problems. Earthquakes, obviously, the cyber attacks have been in the news recently. Things that were alluded to here, EMP, either man-produced or naturally occurring from solar storms and such. These can cause us problems. We're just hopefully getting towards the end of a pandemic. If this were a more severe pandemic, however, there may be all kinds of problems with people just not even being able to show up to work, the inability to maintain lines, these kinds of things. And of course, things like war and terrorism and sabotage, all these things we don't really like to think about, but they are part of the world that we live in. And so let's talk about what we do about it. So where do we begin? Hopefully everybody got my handout. If not, grab some paper and take some notes. And Paul's going to try and get that out if those don't get out to everybody. Hopefully they did. But the first thing you need to decide is how, and we alluded to this a little bit earlier, how much energy do you need to run your critical loads, and what is it that's important to you? You're probably going to have to be selective unless you've got an unlimited budget to spend on some backup power. You're probably going to have to decide, okay, my fridge is important, my freezer is important, medical equipment. This is a big one that we deal with a lot of our audience is, I've got this oxygen concentrator, I need to run that, or a CPAP machine, or these kinds of things. You need to decide what are your critical loads, and then you need to figure out how much energy they consume. And we had that question come up. One of the things that you can get now, of course, you can read on a lot of products. You can read the label on it, and it'll tell you, about how much energy that consumes. Or there's government reports that have a list of all the different kind of appliances and how much energy they use. But I love this thing. I'm an engineer. I love to tinker. I love to run numbers. I use this energy consumption meter, and you can get these on Amazon. They're typically, $15 to $30. You can plug this in, and it will tell you how much energy you're using on an instantaneous basis. but it'll also allow you to plug that in. Like right now, I've got one on my freezer, and it's been running now for over a week. And you can see over time, because obviously that freezer is turning on and then it's shutting off and then on and off. But this will tell you over time how many kilowatt hours you've used in how many minutes, which you can convert to hours and days, however you want to figure that. But this is a great way for you to figure out. Now, I don't have one of these for 220 volt appliances, but this will work for 120 volt appliances. And my wife, it makes her crazy because I plug in everything, waffle irons, her blender, the freezer, the fridge, because I want to understand how much energy these things use. And then you can figure out what you're going to need to plan for. In that, though, you also need to figure in the startup load. So something like a refrigerator or a freezer, like my freezer right now, it uses a maximum of about 100 watts. But to get that freezer started, there's usually about a 3 to 5 times increase in the amount of energy just to get it started. And so you have to figure that in. You have to understand that there is going to be that little peak that you've got to get over before that fridge will actually run. So this will give you some idea. The online resources, the labels, and these power consumption meters can give you a great idea of what you need. So then we look at what are the options that we have available to us. Now, someday, maybe they'll have residential nuclear, but for now, we're dealing with either fuel-based generators or solar and battery-based systems. And each one of these has advantages and each one of these has disadvantages. So we're going to talk through just a little bit. These systems come in, both of these kinds of systems come in very small or very large and everything in between. So let's start with the fuel-based generators. Of course, most of us are fairly familiar with these. Gasoline, diesel, propane. Gasoline is probably the most common. One nice thing about it is you can harvest a little bit out of your cars if you run out. But gasoline is dangerous to store. And so you have to keep that in mind. You need to make sure that you're storing your fuels legally and safely. We don't want to have one problem compound into several problems because we've done something that was either illegal or just not smart. So let's make sure we do that. Diesel is you get more energy per gallon out of diesel and it stores better, probably a little bit safer, but you have some problems with fuel gelling in the winter. So that's something to keep in mind. Propane, a little bit less energy per gallon, but it's generally safer to store. So that is a reasonable option. Natural gas really isn't very common for generators, except there's a lot of systems that you can put right onto your home that will automatically turn that generator on if the power goes off. And those are tied to your natural gas system. Those, at some point, if there was an extended long-term power outage, perhaps that natural gas system would be compromised, but most of the time they're pretty reliable. So let's talk about, there's a couple of types of fuel-based generators. The standard one that we're probably most familiar with, just your typical gas generator. Those are generally a little bit larger. They're very powerful. You don't, or those systems don't adjust to your load. So, typically they're running at higher RPMs, which is not necessarily a good thing, probably not a good thing. They do put out more noise, and the power from them is not quite as clean as the inverter generators that we'll talk about now. The inverter generators are a newer technology. They're more efficient, easy to maintain. They're quiet. They have a very clean waveform. That's one thing that's really nice about the inverter generators is the power that comes out of them is very clean, and a lot of sensitive electronics are just fine running off those where they might have a problem with a standard generator. These systems are very portable, and a lot of these inverter generators are very scalable. Like the Honda generators, you can get a companion to go with it. So if you want to hook those up in parallel, if you're not getting enough energy out of one of them, you can put another one in parallel and use two of them together. So there's some pretty neat technology out there. The advantages of these fuel-based generators is most of them are pretty portable. They produce a lot of power. They can kick out a lot of energy. Disadvantages of the fuel-based generators, you have to store fuel if you want them to run. If you run out of fuel and you can't get more, they're just an expensive lawn ornament. So you really have to store the energy or the fuel to make them run. You have carbon monoxide issues. I'm sure we're all fully aware of carbon monoxide issues. There was a situation a few years ago, a couple living in the Salt Lake area, they needed their oxygen, so they put the generator in the garage and they ran the cord through the door. What could be the harm in that? But it asphyxiated both of them and they died. So, you just have to be tremendously careful with carbon monoxide. And the fuel-based generators, they do make some noise. Like I said, the inverter generators tend to be much more quiet than the standard generator, but they do make some noise. And sometimes they become a target of theft because people hear, oh, they've got power. I want that. And so you hear of these cases where generators disappear. So there are some advantages and disadvantages to these fuel-based systems. Of course, they do need to be maintained. You need to run them at least quarterly. Pull them out, start them up, make sure they're running, make sure they're tuned up. And I like to have spare parts so that if something does go wrong in a crisis situation, I can't fix it, but I've got a good friend that knows small engines inside and out, and he can take care of that for me. I prefer to use stabilized fuel. There's good products out on the market, Stable, PRI, there's others, but I like to use stabilized fuel just to make sure that I keep everything clean and running well. I know we're blowing through this really quick. If you have questions, write them down and we'll talk about them at the end. Let's move into the solar and battery-based systems. Of course, we have all seen rooftop solar. A lot of homes have the rooftop solar, but in many cases, maybe most cases, that's not going to help them when the power goes down. They don't have power just like everybody else. Those are grid-tied systems. If you are going to do this, there are some contractors that will install a system for you. I have a neighbor who has one plug. They can use that one plug. Of course, that's only available to them while the sun shines, but that could run their fridge, that could run their freezer, it could probably run several things to have that one plug that they can use. Other providers will put in a battery system that will allow you to store energy and then be able to use it. So those are options, but like I said, the solar rooftop stuff, most of that is not available. It's just grid tied, and when the power's down, they don't have power just like everyone else. Let's talk about solar power systems. This is something you can design and build yourself. There are good companies out there that can help you do that. Part of the problem is the maintenance with these, because if you're not doing your whole home, then you're just maybe using it for, one of the things you could do is maybe use it for a garage or an outbuilding, put a solar power system on there that then you could use in the event of emergency, and it would be running your shop, but you could also import that, run some cords to critical equipment into the house. So those systems are something, like I said, if you have an interest in it, you can do it yourself. Good companies out there will help you design it, and they're there to answer your questions. Or you can get a good contractor, and there's a bunch of those out there that can help you design and build that system. Solar power systems basically consist of 4 components. You've got your solar panels, you've got your charge controller, and that just controls the charge coming from the panels into your battery system. You don't want to fry those batteries, so when the batteries are full, that charge controller turns the power off. so you don't overcharge those batteries. So, and then of course the battery storage system, and these are typically, you know, especially in the past, have been the weak link. The batteries are, if you're looking at the old lead acid batteries, they require maintenance. You have to irrigate them, make sure the water levels stay up. You have to do equalizing charges, things like that. So there is some maintenance associated with that, but the batteries are that component. And then the inverter portion, which converts that energy back into something that you can use, household power. So those are the four components of a solar power system. Let's talk just a moment about portable power stations. These are something that are relatively new on the market, and there's a lot of them out there. I mean, there are just a lot of companies, many that I can't even pronounce the names. I mean, just everybody's jumped into this market. Maybe some of the more common names are Generarc or EcoFlow, Goal Zero. You may have heard of them. Blue Eddy. There's a lot of companies building these. I've got a little power station right here. This is a Generarc power station, and I don't represent any of these companies, but this is just happens to be one that I have. This one holds has about 1,000 watt hours of storage, which sometimes is hard to comprehend. But think of it, your 10 watt LED light bulb, or your a 10 watt LED light bulb. You could run that for basically 100 hours. So, and as you get, you know, looking at these, you kind of get a feel for it. But these power stations go all the way from, you know, about, well, you have little bitty ones that you charge your phone with, but the stations like these are usually in the range of 100 watt hours up to, I've seen 6,000 watt hours. And there's all kinds of new wrinkles and developments that are hitting that market. Now you've got some where you can buy the inverter unit. So what these units do is they combine the charge controller, the battery storage, and the inverter into that one box. And then right behind me, you can see the solar panel for this. So these systems, you charge them with household power when it's available. Obviously, when the power goes out, then you're going to be using solar, or you can use a generator to meet that charging need. Let's see what I've forgotten here. Typically, as you can see, that solar panel in the background, typically those are portable, non-permanent kind of things, but you could put up some permanent solar on your roof, or, you know, on a tower or whatever, and use that. But typically what comes with these portable power stations is portable power. And they are really neat in that, you know, if my mother needs help with her oxygen concentrator, I can run this system over to her. We can put the solar out there. We can be charging this while we're using it. And then she has portable power to run that. I think that would run hers for, you know, a full night, and then you charge during the day. And obviously you're relying on solar to be able to charge that back up. And if you get several days without solar, then you're looking at a generator. And that's the system that I've designed for my mom, is one of these power stations that she will use most of the time. But if we hit that winter week or two where there's just no solar, then she can charge using the little Honda 2200i, the inverter charge generator. And she can at the same time be doing laundry. She can be doing, you know, a bunch of different things in addition to charging this. And so that might be a great system for a lot of people, to have one of these power stations and then one of these really efficient generators to back that up when needed. And that way you don't have to store a lot of fuel, but you have kind of both of those options, and both of them are very portable if you want to take them up camping, if you want to take them to the park. This portable power station weighs about 23 pounds. So, you know, it's not real light, but it's really not very heavy, and it can provide a lot of utility. These power stations are typically using lithium battery technology, as is so many things You know, things like if you're familiar with the Tesla Powerwall for your home that you can use for backup power. Lithium technology is what is driving a great deal of that. The advantages of a solar battery-based system, no fuel to store. There's no carbon monoxide. They're very quiet. The disadvantages of these systems is they're generally not as powerful. And again, the batteries are the weak point, but these batteries in these power stations are, you know, rated at 2,000 or 3,000 cycles. So they are designed to last a long time. The maintenance for these typically involves cleaning the solar panels, you know, and these solar panels that you see in the background there, they're not made to stay outside. Those go out during the day, they charge, but if it's raining or if it's snowing or you don't leave them out there, they're not made for that kind of use. As I mentioned, the lead acid batteries require irrigating and equalizing charges. And another thing, if you're building a solar power system, you probably want to make sure you have some spare parts. Something like a CME we talked about just a little bit ago, or an EMP of some sort could fry some of the components, the inverter portion and the charge controller portion. Having some spare parts put away in a Faraday cage, and we won't get into Faraday cages. If you have questions, we can talk about those, and I will give you our website and our YouTube channel. You can take a look on there. There's a lot of good information, and we have a contact page. You're always welcome to contact us and get information and help, and you know, because all of this is fairly new for most people. In our audience, we have so many people that are interested in this, but they have no clue. The watts and the volts and all this stuff is just a massive confusion to them. So we're doing some videos and some things to help people understand, and we do a little bit of help, just helping them decide, you know, what they need to get. This has been a real fast blow through. What questions do we have? One other thing I was going to show you that kind of fits into this, and I like gadgets, I like technology. I have this thermometer. It's a remote thermometer, so you have these thermometer units in your freezers. I have one in each of my freezers. And then this unit here that obviously you can see it's hot in my house. It's 78, almost 80 degrees right now because it's sitting right by me and I'm a little warm. But you can see the other freezers at 1.9 degrees. And so one of the things that you can do to help reduce the amount of energy you need is you can set your freezer so it's at a little higher level. Most freezers are usually running at about 0 degrees, but in a crisis situation, you wouldn't need to run it that cold. And this thing could tell you where you are. And so you could plug that freezer in till it got down to maybe 15 degrees. So it's still freezing, but you're not getting it all the way down to 0, which takes a lot more energy. So this is a tool that can help you. For me, it's partly because if my freezer goes out, I want to know, and this has an alarm that will tell me if the temperature gets too warm, so I can take care of the problem. But then it also allows me in a crisis situation to only cool that freezer or fridge down to a point where it's safe, and I can kind of monitor that and only plug it in as needed to keep it cold enough. So I don't know, time-wise, I think I'm out of time, probably past time, but there's probably some questions. Paul, if there's time, let's
Yep.
answer some questions.
We're good. I'm going to take you off the spotlight, and that way I can see who.
Okay.
All right,
Hey.
go ahead. Who's got a question?
Jonathan, this is Troy Ripplinger. Thousands of questions, actually. So can we contact you offline at some point? This is something I've been interested in. Can we tap you for information?
Absolutely. Absolutely. That's my wife and I are the Provident Preppers. We have a website, the providentprepper.org. We have a YouTube channel, the Provident Prepper. We have tons of videos. We have lots of articles. This is our whole mission. This is what we do. It's what our passion is is helping people prepare. And a lot of times when you think about preppers, you think about the extreme preppers. We are the unextreme preppers. We are very community oriented. We're very much, we want to share information with as many people as we can, because the more people we share information with and the more people we help, the more people are part of the solution. Our motto is, you're either part of the solution or you're part of the problem. And if you're not part of the solution, you are part of the problem. And the more people we can make part of the solution, the better off everyone is. So if you get on there, you can
Jonathan?
get on our contact page. You can contact us on our contact page. I'll give you my cell phone number, 801-787-2512. And we just love helping, you know, and like I say, my wife does all the video side of it. She does all that kind of stuff. I'm the technical geek. And I use that term affectionately because it's what I love to do. I love numbers, spreadsheets. I love figuring all this stuff out. And I love teaching people and helping them to get on the path of being more resilient and self-reliant. So yes, please reach out on our website.
Jonathan?
Let's get this done. Yes.
I'll have you send me that contact information and I'll distribute it through the group. That way everybody gets it. Does that work?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Perfect. Who else has a question or questions?
Paul,
Sir,
I just have a question. Can you give us an idea of maybe what to expect for some of the cost for some of these, for a gas generator versus a diesel generator, you know, just so we'd have some kind of idea of cost of what these run?
Jonathan, I'll leave that to you. I don't have
Okay.
much information.
Okay. Yeah. You know, that market is all over the place. And the first thing you want to make sure you look at is quality. And there's a lot of good quality companies out there, but like the Honda generators, they're pricey. Those Honda inverter generators, they're top quality, they're quiet, but they are pricey. So you've got, like everything else, you've got this whole price range of very expensive to very cheap. And a lot of time when you buy very cheap, you get what you pay for, and then you regret it when you really need it. And so you just kind of look out there, decide, you know, which fuel you want to use. If you're going to use a fuel powered generator, decide which fuel is going to work best for you, what you're most comfortable with. And then just kind of look out there and see and do some reviews. Look online, get some guidance from online sources as to, you know, which ones are junk and which ones work well. As far as the solar, the portable power stations, this power station, when I got it, was about $1,000, and the solar was another $400 for two of those panels that you see behind me. So, you know, not cheap, about $1 per watt hour of storage. Another thing you want to look at when you look at these power stations is a couple of things. First, the storage. How many watt hours will it hold? You know, and then you can equate that to how many hours you can run different things. But then you also need to look at what kinds of loads can you put on that. For example, this one right here is only up to 1,000 watts. I can't put a 1,500 watt tool on there because it will just turn itself off. I'm limited to, you know, that 1,000 watts that it tells me. Others are, you know, there's a lot of, like I said, new power stations coming out that are 2,000 watts, 3,000 watts, and you can run a 20 amp 120 system, and I've even saw one today that's can do 220. So, you know, and that's part of the confusion. There's just so much, and a lot of it's so new that you kind of just have to explore it a little bit. And like I said, I'm always happy to give you a few ideas, give you some guidance. So yeah, just start the process and let's roll through it.
Hey, Jeff, if I could just chime in on that. When I've done my background on generators, You've got multiple fuel generators out there. Some will run on diesel, some will run on gas, some run on natural gas, some run on propane. That adds to the cost if there's multiple sources of fuel that are available. Size makes a difference. The noise output makes a huge difference, whether it's an inverter generator or not. An inverter allows you to run basic stuff like an iPhone charger or radios or some type of electric device you would normally plug into a house. It gives you a constant state of energy, where some of the other energy or generators don't do that, and they can actually damage that equipment. You have to put an inverter in between them.
Right.
Go online. You can go down to Harbor Freight and buy a Predator for a couple $100. You can go buy the Honda, which I actually had a Honda for a lot of years. That thing ran, it was a top. We used it for years and years. They're about $1,200, but it's only 2,100 watt generator, which doesn't run a whole lot except small appliances. The big ones, the 7,000 watt, the 9,500 watt that I'm told will run the most, at least keep a house running, your refrigerator, basic lights, that kind of stuff, you're probably looking at $1,000 for. In the big scope of things, there's not a lot of money, but you can spend as much as you want or as little as you want. So follow Jonathan's advice, review online, and spend what you can afford and go from there.
Yeah.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
Another nice thing about these, like these power stations, they have all kinds of outputs. You have your 12-volt cigarette lighter plug. You've got a USB. You've got USB-C. You've got your standard outlets, and so it gives you a lot of variety on here as to different formats that you can use.
Any other questions for Jonathan? Last chance. Jonathan, thank you so much, sir. Very informative. Give me that
Thank you for
information. I'll
having
make
me.
sure it gets distributed. I haven't
Okay.
had a chance to visit your website, but I will. A lot of good information, I'm sure, there, and very critical to what we do with the emergency preparedness group. So anyways, just by way of information, this should be up on the website tomorrow or Monday at the latest, depending on when my webpage person can get it up and posted. I'll also post Jonathan's outline, so you have that. And then as soon as I get Jonathan's information on his website, his YouTube channel, and his cell phone, I'll get that distributed through your district reps. I don't want to put that on the website, but we'll definitely put it out there to your district reps, and they can distribute it down the chain. So, all right, having said that, does anybody have any questions or comments for the group before we call it a night? Hearing none, I'm going to call an end to the night. It was a great night of training. I think this was very informative. In fact, some of the most informative we've had since we started these quarterly trainings. So we will convene again in a quarterly training on November 11th. We'll talk about Neighborhood Watch, which is another part of emergency preparedness. It's got a little different twist to it. So thank you for your attendance, and we'll see you guys in a couple of months.
Thanks,
Good night,
Paul.
all.
We appreciate all your help. Thank you.
Thank you, Andy. Talk to you later.
Thank you. Thank
Good
you.
night, all.
Bye.